You wake up to the sound of cannons echoing across the Austrian countryside. Your first breath carries the scent of gunpowder, imperial silk, and the weight of a crumbling empire. Your father isn't just any man. He's Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who conquered Europe, the legend who crowned himself before kings, the genius who rewrote the map of the world with blood and brilliance. You're born into the shadow of greatness, but that shadow grows longer with each defeat. Your cradle is carved from oak, taken from battlefields where your father claimed victory. But outside your nursery, the world he built is falling apart. From your earliest memories, you're surrounded by the sounds of retreat. Messengers arrive with reports of lost battles and broken alliances. Foreign diplomats speak in whispers about your father's declining health. Your tutors teach you French, German, and Italian, but you hear defeat in every language. This is your inheritance. This is your burden. Your childhood is spent in the Palace of Schönbrunn, but it feels more like a golden prison. Your father is in exile on Elba. Your mother, Marie-Louise, is more Austrian than French. Your grandfather is the Emperor of Austria, the man who helped destroy your father's empire. You're caught between two worlds that define themselves by their hatred of each other. The Bonaparte legacy and the Habsburg tradition, the revolutionary spirit and the old order, the man who conquered Europe and the powers that brought him down. Your tutors aren't French generals or revolutionary philosophers. They're Austrian nobles and conservative scholars. They teach you that your father was a tyrant who brought chaos to Europe, that his wars were crimes against humanity, that his empire was built on the suffering of millions. But they also whisper that you carry his genius in your blood, his strategic mind and political instinct, his ability to inspire loyalty and command respect, the dangerous gift that could either restore an empire or destroy what's left of your life. Your father appears in your world like a ghost returning from the dead. The 100 Days, his escape from Elba and return to France. For 3 months, the eagle soars again. You're 4 years old, barely understanding politics, but you feel the electricity in the air. Suddenly, servants treat you with new respect. Foreign ambassadors speak your name with fear. Your mother receives letters sealed with the imperial eagle. Then comes Waterloo, the final defeat, the end of everything. Your father becomes the prisoner of St. Helena, an island at the end of the world. You'll never see him again. Your education becomes a careful balance between truth and propaganda. You learn about your father's military campaigns, but only their costs. You study his legal reforms, but only their limitations. You read his letters, but only those that show his human weaknesses. Your Austrian tutors want you to understand your heritage without being inspired by it, to know your father's story without wanting to continue it, to carry the Bonaparte name without the Bonaparte ambition. But genius has its own logic. By age 10, you're reading military histories that weren't assigned, studying maps of your father's campaigns, understanding the strategies that conquered Europe. Your tutors find you recreating the Battle of Austerlitz with toy soldiers. They confiscate your books and replace them with philosophy and poetry, but they can't confiscate what's in your blood. Your adolescence is spent feeling like you belong to no nation and no cause. Too French for Austrian society, too Austrian for French Republicans, too young to remember your father's glory, too old to ignore the weight of his legacy. European courts watch you with nervous attention. You're the son of their greatest enemy, raised in their midst. A potential threat they can't eliminate but can't ignore. Your every word is analyzed for signs of Bonapartist sentiment. Your every action is watched for evidence of inherited ambition. You learn to be careful, diplomatic, and strategically invisible. But inside, you're burning with questions that can't be answered. What would Europe look like if your father had won? What kind of man could conquer a continent before age 40? What kind of son disappoints a father who expected to found a dynasty? Your coming of age happens against the backdrop of revolutionary upheaval. The July Revolution of 1830, the Polish Uprising, the Belgian independence movement. Across Europe, people are fighting for the ideals your father once represented. Liberty, equality, national sovereignty. But you're watching from the sidelines, a spectator to history instead of its author. Your Austrian guardians make sure you understand the lesson. This is what happens when Bonapartes get involved in politics. This is why you must remain a private citizen with a dangerous name. But private citizens don't have thousands of French veterans dreaming of their return. They don't have letters from conspirators proposing restoration plots. They don't have a name that makes kings nervous and republicans hopeful. Your name is a weapon you're not allowed to use, a legacy you're not permitted to claim, a destiny you're forbidden to pursue. At 20, you join the Austrian army as a simple officer, not because you love Austria, but because it's the only way to learn warfare. Your fellow officers treat you with suspicious respect. They know your lineage but pretend not to care. They watch for signs of treachery while depending on your tactical insights. Your military education accelerates rapidly, not because your superiors trust you, but because war is coming. Italian revolutionaries are demanding independence. Your tactical analyses prove accurate. Your strategic recommendations prove valuable. Your leadership in small engagements proves natural. You're fighting for the empire that destroyed your father's empire, but you're also learning the skills that built your father's legend. The ability to read terrain like text, to inspire soldiers through personal example, to see opportunity where others see only chaos. Every battle teaches you something about your inheritance, not just the Bonaparte name, but the Bonaparte mind. The way your father saw the world as a chessboard where nations were pieces, where victory went to whoever could think furthest ahead, where greatness was measured by the scope of one's ambitions. Your moment comes during the Italian campaign of 1848. Austrian forces are retreating before nationalist uprisings. Your unit is surrounded near a village whose name won't be remembered by history. Your commanding officer is wounded. Command falls to you by default. You have 300 men against 3,000. No artillery, limited ammunition, and no hope of reinforcement. Your father won Austerlitz under similar odds. For the first time in your life, you stop thinking like an Austrian officer and start thinking like a Bonaparte. You don't retreat or surrender. You attack, not where the enemy expects, but where they're weakest. Not with the force you have, but with the force they think you have. You use deception, timing, and psychological warfare. The tactics your father perfected at Rivoli and Friedland. The enemy breaks and scatters. Your 300 capture 3,000. The victory is reported to Vienna as a minor engagement, but you know what really happened. For one afternoon, the ghost of Napoleon commanded Austrian troops. For one moment, you proved that genius can be inherited. The victory changes everything and nothing. You're promoted and decorated. Your tactical report is studied at the War College. Your name appears in dispatches read by emperors and generals, but you're still a Habsburg officer in Austrian service. Still the domesticated son of a wild father. Still a potential weapon kept safely in the enemy's arsenal. News arrives that changes your world forever. Revolution in France. The overthrow of King Louis-Philippe. The proclamation of the Second Republic. Suddenly, Bonapartism isn't just nostalgia. It's a political possibility. Letters arrive from France through secret channels. Deputations of Republicans asking you to return. Veterans of the Grande Armée pledging their loyalty. Political organizers promising electoral support. They want you to claim your father's legacy, to restore the Bonaparte dynasty, to fulfill the destiny that St. Helena interrupted. Your Austrian handlers panic. Suddenly, you're not just a useful officer with a dangerous name. You're a legitimate threat to the European order. They offer you everything to stay. Higher rank, better assignments, marriage into Austrian nobility. A comfortable life in exchange for renouncing French ambitions. But comfortable isn't why men conquer continents. Safe isn't why eagles soar above the battlefield. You make the choice that defines everything that follows. You desert your Austrian commission and flee to France. Your return to Paris feels like awakening from a long dream. Crowds gather wherever you appear. They see Napoleon in your face and hear empire in your voice. Veterans weep when you visit their meetings. Republicans cheer when you speak of popular sovereignty. Even your enemies admit you have the Bonaparte magnetism. But having a famous name isn't the same as having political power. France is exhausted by revolution and wary of adventurers. The memory of your father's wars is still fresh, the cost of his ambitions still being calculated. You're elected to the National Assembly, but as one voice among many, your political education begins in earnest. Democracy is messier than military command. Compromise is harder than conquest. Building consensus takes longer than winning battles. Your father could decree laws and expect obedience. You must persuade, negotiate, and occasionally retreat. The skills that won empires aren't always useful in parliaments. But you adapt because adaptation is also a Bonaparte trait. Your opportunity comes from an unexpected source. The presidential election of 1848. The French people want stability, but they also want glory. They're tired of weakness, but afraid of chaos. Your name offers both nostalgia for past greatness and promise of future order. Your campaign is a masterpiece of political theater. You invoke your father's achievements without promising his methods. You appeal to democratic values while hinting at imperial efficiency. You offer France the Bonaparte magic without the Bonaparte disasters. The results are overwhelming. You win more votes than all other candidates combined. At 40, you're the elected leader of the nation your father once ruled as emperor. But leading a republic isn't the same as commanding an empire. You have constitutional limits, political opposition, and financial constraints. The National Assembly watches your every move for signs of tyrannical ambition. Foreign powers wait for any excuse to intervene. Your own supporters expect miracles you can't deliver through legal means. You try to govern within democratic constraints, but democracy moves too slowly. Economic crisis demands swift action. Social unrest requires firm response. International threats need decisive leadership. Every problem you face would have been simple for Napoleon III to solve. But Napoleon didn't have to worry about elections or constitutional review. He could act first and justify later. You must justify first and hope action remains possible. The frustration builds until it becomes unbearable. On December 6, 1951, the anniversary of Austerlitz, you stage a coup. Not a bloody revolution, but a constitutional seizure. You dissolve the National Assembly and assume emergency powers. You justify the action as necessary to save democracy from itself. Your enemies call it betrayal. Your supporters call it salvation. History will call it inevitable. A Bonaparte will always choose decisive action over democratic paralysis. The coup succeeds because France wants it to succeed. People vote overwhelmingly to approve your actions. They trade democratic rights for the promise of effective leadership. They choose Bonaparte efficiency over Republican chaos. Within a year, you're proclaimed Emperor Napoleon III. The dynasty your father established is restored. The eagle soars again over French battlefields, but you discover that reviving an empire is harder than creating one. Your father conquered Europe when it was divided and weak. You face a Europe that learned from his victories. Stronger alliances, better armies, more unified resistance. The tactics that worked at Jena don't work at Sedan. The strategies that conquered Austria fail against Prussia. Your wars bring defeat instead of glory. Your empire contracts instead of expanding. Your reign ends not with exile to an island, but with capture on a battlefield. Your son, Napoleon IV, dies fighting for Britain in Africa. The dynasty dies with him. Your father's legacy dies with you. In your final years, you reflect on the weight of inherited greatness. You restored the Bonaparte name to the French throne. You gave France 20 years of stability and progress. You built railways, reformed cities, and modernized the economy. But you also learned that genius isn't genetic. That timing matters more than talent. That history doesn't repeat, it only rhymes. Your father conquered Europe because Europe was ready to be conquered. You lost Europe because Europe was ready to resist. The same name, the same blood, but a different world. You die in exile in England, like your father died in exile on St. Helena. But your exile is comfortable, voluntary, and temporary. You're a fallen emperor, not a dangerous prisoner. The world has moved beyond the age when one man could reshape continents. Your legacy is more modest than your father's. A reminder that greatness skips generations. That legends cast shadows too long for their children to escape. That trying to repeat history often leads to tragedy instead of triumph. But you also proved that Bonaparte courage was real. That the name meant something beyond nostalgia. That democracy could coexist with effective leadership. That eagles can soar again, even if they can't reach the same heights. Your story is told in museums now, not epic poems. Your battles studied as footnotes, not masterpieces. Your empire remembered as the Second Empire, forever secondary to the first. But you answered the question that haunted your childhood. What kind of man could be the son of Napoleon and still make his own mark on history? A man brave enough to try, foolish enough to believe, human enough to fail, and French enough to die with dignity intact.